Remote parts of the restive eastern region of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live only on CGTN. Wherever you're tuning in, I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Joining me now with your business headlines is Ramanya.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. African leaders are being urged to enhance their collaboration at this year's International Energy Summit in Nigeria. And we'll explore why so many businesses in Africa are cautious about the United States' decision to extend the African Growth and Opportunity Act for 1 year. We'll have the data and the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Mahia.
All right, Rama, thank you. We begin at the top of the hour in Pakistan, where at least 31 people have been killed in an explosion at a mosque in the nation's capital. The Deputy Commissioner of Islamabad said scores of people were also injured and many are in critical condition. The blast occurred at the Khadijatul Kubra Mosque during Friday prayers. Local police say an investigation is currently underway. According to witnesses, a suicide bomber detonated himself after being stopped at the entrance of the mosque. Security measures across the capital remain heightened. Elsewhere, the first round of high-stakes nuclear talks between Iran and the U.S. have concluded in Oman. While speaking to Iranian state TV, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the discussion was a good start. Araghchi noted there was an understanding on continuing the talks, but coordination on how to proceed will be decided in the capitals. The talks come as tensions rise across the region, with the U.S. increasing its military presence and Iran in turn stepping up its military preparations. Well, our correspondent Nadia Swan is in the Omani capital Muscat and now joins us live with the latest. Nadia, thank you for speaking to us. The Oman broker talks, as we've been hearing, have now ended. What were some of the key outcomes from the talks there?
That's right. Well, as you said earlier on, the Iranian Prime Minister Abbas Araghchi ended on a very positive note, saying that they had been good and there was a good framework for an understanding and that these discussions would continue. But first they would have to go back to their respective capitals, Tehran and Washington, and discuss these points further with the leaders there, because obviously these are negotiating teams as opposed to people who can make those decisions. So those will all have to be cleared back in their home countries. The talks were indirect talks, so sort of shuttle diplomacy with the Iranian foreign minister first meeting with the Omani foreign minister, who then met later with the US lead negotiator Steve Witkoff. So those initial round of talks seem to have gone down well. What we understand is that they have talked about the nuclear capabilities that Iran has, and the Iranian foreign minister said that that was one of the key things that they were going to talk to the United States about, but they weren't going to discuss anything outside of that. And the US obviously had a list of things that they wanted to discuss, which was the nuclear program as well as the ballistic missiles program that Iran has. And they also want to talk about Iran's support for armed groups within the region, as well as the fate of Iran's population following violent protests last month. So a lot on the table, and the Iranians saying the only thing they were prepared to discuss was their nuclear talks.
Right. Iran has repeatedly said, Nadia, that it will not discuss its missiles program, which is one of the biggest of its kind, arsenals of its kind in the region. How is this likely to shape the talks going forward? And also, we're hearing that the Iran's foreign minister has described today's talks as a good start to the negotiations. What comes next in this new mediation effort?
Well, as you mentioned, Iran's ballistic missile program is very important, and Iran has said that they are not prepared to discuss that. They unveiled their Khorramshahr 4 missile today, a very powerful ballistic missile that's capable of reaching 2,000 kilometers and can carry 1,500 kilograms of warhead on it as well. So well able to reach neighboring countries if Iran is attacked. So the interesting thing now is to see whether the Americans think that it's a good start as well, talking about just the nuclear capability that Iran has, or if there's a gap between what the Americans want to discuss and what the Iranians are prepared to discuss, The question is, does that leave the door open for any kind of military action by President Trump? We've seen the Americans building up a vast military force in the Arabian Gulf. They've got fighter jets, they've got aircraft carriers, and they have increased their presence with troops at many U.S. military bases in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Qatar, and in Bahrain, and in Jordan as well. So the question is there something positive and strong enough for the next round of talks to be built on, really?
All right, Nadia, thank you very much for your insights there. Nadia Swan there in Muscat, Oman. Moving on, Ukraine and Russia have concluded a second round of U.S. brokered talks in Abu Dhabi, in which they failed to reach a breakthrough on key territorial disputes, a ceasefire and security guarantees. But a U.S. special envoy says the three countries have reached a consensus on a prisoner swap, the first of its kind in 5 months. Steve Witkoff says discussions were specific and constructive, but greater efforts are required to advance a comprehensive settlement. There is no timetable for another round of talks, but Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says it will be held soon, most likely in the U.S.
From what I can already divulge now, further meetings are planned, most likely in America. We are ready to take part in any working formats which can really bring peace closer and make it sound and lasting.
The United Nations has warned of increasing displacement of Palestinians living in the West Bank. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says more than 900 Palestinians have been forced out of homes or communities since the year began, mostly due to Israeli settler violence and restrictions. It documented more than 50 Israeli settler attacks that resulted in casualties and property damage in the 2 weeks to February the 2nd. Activists with the global Sumud Flotilla have announced plans for a new campaign to break the Israeli blockade of Gaza, and they chose the South African city of Johannesburg to deliver the announcement. This latest initiative follows a previous GSF mission last October, where nearly 500 activists were arrested after their boats were intercepted by the Israeli military. Now, leaders of the group said they chose South Africa as the site to launch their campaign due to its long history of resistance against apartheid, a struggle they believe mirrors the Palestinian experience today. They promised that the next mission, set to begin in late March, will be even bigger and bolder. Here now is CGTN's Yolisa Njamela with that report.
The announcement was made at a press conference at the Nelson Mandela Foundation in Johannesburg. A deliberate choice, members of the Flotilla Steering Committee said, to highlight the former South African president's lifelong support for the Palestinian cause. South African activists have been central to building international support for the flotilla, drawing on lessons from their own liberation struggle.
Being here in South Africa is a reminder of what people can do, what mobilizations can achieve, what global effort of campaigning, of political mobilization, of all the sectors coming together to work in all the different fields. This is what we want to do with our movement.
This will be the Global Sumud Flotilla's largest mission to date, and will aim to break the Israeli blockade of Gaza by both land and sea. More than 3,000 participants from over 100 countries are expected to join, traveling aboard more than 100 vessels. The Spring 2026 Flotilla mission will include specialized medical ships with over 1,000 healthcare professionals to support Gaza's healthcare infrastructure. The previous flotilla was intercepted by Israeli naval forces, with participants detained and later released following global outcry. But leaders say they learned from that experience and that the new mission will be more sophisticated.
We will have medical professionals with us. We will have criminal investigators with us, which is the difference with the previous mission. We have Palestinians included in our steering committee, in our whole system, because we are not talking about a system where we as non-Palestinians are deciding for the Palestinians.
Reverend Frank Chikane, the chair of the South African chapter of the Anti-Apartheid Movement for Palestine, addressed the conference. He said the mission reflected the growing frustration that ceasefire commitments made by Israel remain unfulfilled and humanitarian needs in Gaza continue to go unmet.
You can't keep bombing Gaza, then say we've got a solution and we've got a ceasefire. Gazans respect the ceasefire, but they bomb them every day. And the Western countries say absolutely nothing. Hundreds of people have been killed since that ceasefire.
Comments from other senior members of the steering committee reflected their determination to succeed in breaking the blockade.
We are giving back the power to the people. We are acting together from the people for the people. So we say to you, Israel, your time has come to stop the genocide before the tsunami of the free people of the world hits you.
Other speakers included Mandla Mandela, a grandson of the late former president, who returned home with 4 other South Africans from the first mission after being held in an Israeli prison for 6 days. He underscored his grandfather's solidarity with Palestine.
My grandfather didn't mince his words when he said our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinian people. This is the commitment he made to the Palestinian people. And now that he's no more, he's handed the baton to all of us. And therefore we want to mobilize the entire global community to join forces with us and accompany us and ensure that we are able to stop the genocide in real time.
The Spring 2026 Flotilla, described as a non-violent effort, will depart from ports in Barcelona, Italy, and other Mediterranean locations in late March. Yodisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now to the DRC, where the African Union says a recent drone attack by a rebel group on a civilian airport may constitute an act of terrorism. Earlier this week, the M23-led Congo River Alliance claimed responsibility for the attack on Kisangani Airport, calling it a warning shot to the government. The attack marked an escalation in the conflict in eastern DRC, where the M23 has seized large swaths of territory since early last year. Now, despite peace efforts, clashes have intensified, with hospitals across the region treating the wounded from both sides of the conflict. CGTN's Crystal Onkeo reports.
The General Hospital in Fizi, a town in the lower half of South Kivu, has seen a spike in patients in recent days. Most are wounded soldiers bearing gunshot wounds from the front line in the mountains.
We were in Kichula village on an investigation patrol during the war against rebels. That's where we were attacked by Nyamulenge groups. I was hit by a bullet that entered through my foot and exited through my thigh. The side where the bullet exited doesn't have many problems, but the other side is severely affected. The entire area no longer functions. Apart from that, the government is thinking about our equipment. We fight because we are men, but the reality on the ground is completely different.
Recent fighting has centered around Minembwe Highlands in Fizi territory, where the army has launched an operation against the M23 and its local ally, the Twirwaneho, a group formed by Congolese Tutsi. The fighting, unfolding away from urban areas and largely overlooked by international mediators, is drawing in more forces from all sides of the war. Meanwhile, casualties continue to mount. Many patients suffer from infected wounds due to inadequate frontline medical facilities, with the main hospital in the town overwhelmed.
In early January, we received many patients. We had to manage 115 patients, which far exceeded the hospital's capacity. There was high demand compared to available resources. We were cut off from our supply zone in Uvira. Uvira was closed. Burundi had closed its borders, and we could not go to Kalemi to get medicine. It was very complicated. Fortunately, we had small quantities of medicine stored before Uvira closed, as well as donations from the government and ICRC. This allowed us to hold on during this period. For the war, I do not know much.
The staff at Fizi's hospital say the flow of the wounded shows no sign of easing, and they worry they will not be able to cope much longer as supplies dwindle and fighting continues. Analysts say the highlands around Uvira are strategically significant due to their access to important lowland towns. While the Congolese government presents the fighting as part of efforts to re-establish authority, AFC M23 claims its presence aims to protect the Congolese Tutsi. Authorities accuse the group of exploiting long-standing community tensions related to land, cattle and representation. This escalation comes as Kinshasa and the AFC M23 agreed this week to activate a Qatari-mediated ceasefire monitoring mechanism, with the UN team set to deploy to Uvira in the coming days. Crystal Onkeo, CGTN.
The United Nations Secretary General has condemned this week's deadly attacks in Nigeria's Kwara state. At least 170 people were killed on Tuesday night when suspected jihadist fighters targeted Woro and Nuku villages. Many people are still missing there. President Bola Tinubu has deployed an army battalion to the region, saying it will look to stem further attacks and protect remote communities. The United States, who also condemned the attack, welcomed President Tinubu's directive. In a statement issued by his spokesperson, Antonio Guterres conveyed his sympathies to the country and called for the perpetrators to be held accountable.
The Secretary General conveys his heartfelt condolences to the families of the victims and to the people and government of Nigeria, and he of course wishes a speedy recovery to all those injured. The Secretary General reiterates the solidarity of the United Nations with the government and people of Nigeria in their efforts to fight terrorism and violent extremism. He stresses the importance of bringing the perpetrators to justice.
Meanwhile, the Christian Association says all 166 worshippers who were kidnapped in Kaduna State last month have been rescued. The group, which represents congregations across Nigeria, credited the military for the success of the operation. Gunmen stormed 2 churches, according to the association, seizing 177 worshippers and dragging them into nearby forests. Now, 11 managed to escape there. It's just one of a series of attacks and abductions in the north that have drawn the attention of U.S. President Donald Trump, who accused Nigeria's government of failing to protect Christians. Nigerian authorities say they are cooperating with Washington to improve security and have denied systematic persecution of Christians.
Our focus is to make sure that everyone returns safely. I'm today happy because the people of Kurmin Wali are seated here in high spirits because they believe in our government. They know that they have a government that will go to any lengths to ensure that they return home safely.
To the Republic of Congo now, where incumbent President Denis Sassou Nguesso has announced plans to seek re-election. The oil-rich Central African country is scheduled to hold its presidential elections on March the 15th. Nguesso, who has ruled the country for more than 4 decades, made the announcement on Thursday, pledging to dedicate more efforts towards improving food security. The country is heavily reliant on food imports, leaving the population vulnerable to international price fluctuations. If the 82-year-old wins a new 5-year term, it will be his last under the current constitution, which sets a limit of 3. It's time for us to take a short break. You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Here's what's coming up. We'll visit the drought-hit Horn of Africa, where school attendance is keeping children from acute hunger. Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. On to environmental matters now. Authorities in Morocco have issued urgent evacuation orders for residents in flood-prone areas of the northwestern plains. Many neighborhoods and crop fields have been submerged following the overflow of Lucus River. The Interior Ministry says more than 100,000 people have so far been moved. Most evacuations took place in Ksar El Kebir, which is about 90 kilometers south of the city of Tangier. Now, state TV coverage shows evacuees receiving shelter and food. Concerns are growing over the Oued Makazine Dam, which is nearing 150% capacity. Well, it's a very different story in the Horn of Africa, where millions of people are facing acute hunger as the region faces what experts say is its worst drought in 45 years. As families struggle to get food and water, education is often the first casualty as parents pull their children from school to help with the survival effort. Yet, as CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa now reports, the classroom may be their best bet.
It's the first school term, and Jabibari Primary School in Mandera, a village at the extreme tip of northeastern Kenya, should be bustling with activity. Instead, only a few learners assemble in a single classroom. As the drought intensifies here, education has become a luxury that many pastoralist families can no longer afford. At least 100 pupils are continually absent.
The animals have died and the parents have left without animals. Most of the parents have left to go and get help from other relatives, and then in that the enrollment has gone down.
A mid-morning arrival delivers a serving of hope. The fortified flour distributed by the Kenya Red Cross and the county government is used to make cups of porridge.
So when they are going home, they are not getting any food, but if they get food or porridge in this school, at least always they will be here and they will be punctual for learning and they will be present.
This is all many pupils will have most days, and the crisis is worsening, and not just in Kenya's northeast. Across the country, nearly 750,000 children under 5 are facing acute malnutrition. In semi-arid areas as much of northeastern Kenya is, the loss of livestock also means the loss of meat and milk, the primary sources of protein for children. And the porridge isn't always enough. Sometimes they are forced to wash down their hunger with water.
The drought has really tormented us for a long time. Our animals have died and we have nothing. All we have is this water.
But even water has become a luxury. As the drought intensifies, this river, like many others here, is drying up, forcing families to go further in search of this vital commodity. Theirs is a daily, frantic struggle for basic hydration. Water trucks sometimes bring relief, but when water is this scarce, it comes with several health risks.
The hygiene aspect has also gone down because the little water that the community have, they normally share with the livestock, and it is not even enough at a household level. So likelihood that we will experience watery diarrhea, cholera outbreak, as well as other water-related waterborne diseases is one key scenarios.
The Kenya government has said it requires 6 billion Kenya shillings, or about $46.5 million, for different drought interventions. As discussions continue, the pace of the drought seems to be too quick for the available aid, and for the affected, most days seem to bring a yawning hunger that finds no satisfaction. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN, Mandera.
Now, February the 6th marks the International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation, or FGM, a global reminder that millions of girls remain at risk from a practice widely condemned as a violation of human rights. The UN is pushing a campaign to end the practice by 2030, but progress remains fragile in many countries. None more so, perhaps, than in the Gambia, where an extraordinary parliament attempt in 2024 to repeal a landmark anti-FGM law ultimately exposed deep social, religious and political divisions. It also raised serious questions as to how secure any progress really is. Our correspondent Lena Igweanyiba reports now from Banjul.
In the Gambia, ending female genital mutilation is no longer a question of law. It is a test of political courage, religious influence, and how much progress a fragile democracy can protect. Just over a year ago, this country stood at the brink of being the first country in the world to ever repeal a ban on FGM.
While FGM is no longer widely debated in many parts of the world, it remains a lived reality in the Gambia and remains deeply rooted in parts of Gambian society, particularly in rural communities.
The fact that we are in 2026 and we are talking about little girls' genitals being cut tells us what a problem we have. One of the things that I must keep emphasizing is how we really need to accelerate efforts. We need, especially in the Gambia, a multi-sectoral approach where FGM is not just considered as a gender issue.
Behind the politics are real lives. Survivors warn that weakening the law would legitimize a practice that causes lifelong physical and psychological harm, often carried out on girls who have little or no say in the matter.
I have fears. I have fears that all my fights might end up being zero. If the law is repealed, I will not be able to protect my girls. I come from a family that support FGM, and having the law repealed is like I don't have anywhere to lean on, saying if anything has to happen to my girls, that I'm going to take the law when there is no law.
The Gambia is a Muslim majority country where religious leaders hold enormous influence and where patriarchy, male dominance in family and community decision-making remains deeply entrenched.
We've seen other countries with majority Muslims and they do not practice FGM. So that tells us that FGM is really not a religious obligation. It is a tradition, it is a cultural practice that has been going on in this country for decades and decades. And I do believe FGM can be ended. FGM is man-made, but also importantly, we are seeing progress. We are seeing that in the Gambia, 46% of women are saying that, and especially survivors, are saying that they are changing their minds on FGM and that the practice should not continue. We are seeing so many young women are ending FGM in their families. I am a survivor of FGM. I am already seeing in my family that we are moving away from the practice.
Some lawmakers acknowledge that efforts to repeal the ban are still ongoing. With another parliamentary term, another bill, or another shift in political alliances, the law could once again come under attack.
The ban on the FGM is something else in the Gambia. Of course, I know they're still on it. They've not stopped. They are still making sure that the ban is lifted, and that has been their campaign all along, and they will continue doing that. So perhaps what we will do more is to ensure that there is enforcement in the law by the relevant authorities. Like anybody who is found wanting doing this practice, what the law says should be made on deposit.
As the world marks the International Day of Zero Tolerance for FGM, the Gambia stands as a reminder that passing a law is just the beginning. Without political commitment, community engagement, and the courage to challenge harmful norms, progress can be reversed. With 2030 fast approaching, the question is not whether FGM can end, but whether the progress gains can be protected. Lena Igwenyiba, CGTN Banjul.
Well, FGM is not tied to any single religion or culture, but is a social norm rooted in gender inequality and attempts to control female sexuality, and is highly prevalent across Africa. However, many countries are seeing local resistance movements, and our Sudanese correspondent Naba Mohideen met one of these in Port Sudan.
Inside this displacement camp in Port Sudan, a young mother cradles her daughters and makes a choice. She says most women in her community never had. Amid war and uncertainty, she refuses to allow her child to undergo female genital mutilation, despite deep-rooted social pressure. She says protecting her daughter's future is more important than tradition, even if it means standing alone within her community.
I was uprooted from Omdurman and I live in this camp for almost 3 years. I don't believe FGM can be a tool of protection, and my husband supports my decision. I wish all mothers to stop this negative practice that harms girls in all of their life stages.
Female genital mutilation is the practice involving partial or total removal of the external female genitalia. Medical staff say they continue to witness the physical and emotional consequences of FGM. They report treating girls and women with infections, complications during childbirth, and long-term pain that could have been prevented. Health workers said that years of awareness campaigns have shifted attitudes, but the conflict in Sudan has disrupted outreach programs, closed the schools, and strained medical services, limiting safe spaces where families once received education about the risks of FGM.
I'm the head of the Red Sea Midwives School. We never teach FGM to midwives in the curriculum. It's an illegal practice that is done in the dark by the families and the midwives in a very unhealthy environment that could lead to serious health complications, including bleeding or even death. And if the child survives, she can face serious risks in other stages of life, like pregnancy and childbirth. This wrong practice needs collaboration and strong laws in order to be stopped, and we are continuing our campaigns and fight against it.
Doctors say the lack of consistent information is fueling a resurgence in the controversial practice. With communities displaced and social services stretched thin, misinformation is breached more easily and harmful practices can return unchecked. Healthcare workers stress that ending FGM is not only a medical issue, but a protection issue, one tied to education, stability, and a woman's rights. Without sustained investment, they warn, the progress made over decades could be reversed.
We've seen a surge in practice after years of conflict. Some families believe FGM can be a means of protection for their daughters in conflict zones from sexual violence such as rapes, and also in IDP camps. The insecurity and the lack of awareness are exacerbating the issue, despite that we continue to talk to local communities to raise awareness, but absence of law enforcement in such a fragile situation is making more families practice FGM again.
The theme of this year's International Day of Zero Tolerance for Female Genital Mutilation is toward 2030, but the UN says eliminating it by then will require stronger alliances between governments, civil society groups, and local leaders, especially during times of crisis.
Advocates argue that protecting girls cannot be postponed until conflict ends. For mothers choosing differently, the decision represents a quiet act of resistance and hope. Campaigners say every refusal helps build momentum toward a future where girls grow up free from harm. Naba Muhiddin, CGTN, Port Sudan.
Right, let's turn to Nigeria, where an ancient healing practice has retained its relevance despite modern medical alternatives. The practice, which is often used for treating enlarged spleens, combines artistry and herbal functions and remains popular in remote places where medical access may be limited. Well, some say it's saving lives, but medical doctors have taken issue with the practice. CGTN's David Mbiti explains why.
At a glance, these incisions resemble ordinary tattoos. But here, in rural communities across southern Nigeria's Edo state, the artfully placed scars are part of an ancient healing practice that continues despite the advance of modern medicine. Traditional healer Justina Oko has been doing this for a long time and says the treatment is for enlarged spleens, a common enough condition in malaria-endemic regions like this one. She says a herbal remedy is applied on the incisions, which are made using a razor blade.
This is the medicine that I use on the cuts. It will remain black, but it eliminates the sickness.
The herbs Oko uses come from local plants she harvests herself. She pounds dried stems into powder and creates mixtures she claims will melt the condition and flush it from the body. The healer maintains the treatment has saved lives in the community, and that belief is shared by some of the locals.
No hospital where I not go.
I went to several hospitals and they could not cure my grandchildren. People told me that it could be enlarged spleens and urged me to visit a traditional healer. I took them to the healer and asked if she could do it. She said yes, and she did it, and since then they have not been sick again.
All of them.
Businessman Cyril Itua also says his 4-year-old son benefited from the treatment.
After we did it, we went to the hospital to confirm. Everything was normal after the result came out. The blood was okay. I feel good now. No more stress. I can travel out for work and not scared of emergencies at home. I am happy.
Medical professionals, however, oppose the traditional use of scarification as a mode of treating splenomegaly, which is the medical term for enlarged spleen. But they say medical science could stand to benefit from research on the herbal remedies.
Number one, splenomegaly is not a disease. Where there is splenomegaly, look for the disease entity, take care of it, the spleen will recede. You need to go out telling people, educating people, health education, telling them about how these things are not the dangers that they pose and how on therapeutic they are.
Despite this, the practice continues to attract patients in rural areas where access to modern healthcare remains limited, highlighting the tension between traditional medicine and modern medical science in Nigeria. David Mbidi, CGTN.
Right, it's time for all your business news. Rama's back with your headlines.
Thank you very much, Mahia. Here's what's coming up in the world of money. African leaders are being urged to enhance their collaboration at this year's International Energy Summit in Nigeria. And we'll explore why many enterprises in Africa are cautious about the United States' decision to extend the African Growth and Opportunity Act. Let's start in energy policy. African leaders are being urged to enhance collaboration in their efforts to deliver cleaner, more affordable and more secure energy supplies across the continent. The call came during the 9th edition of the Nigeria International Energy Summit. Thousands of delegates came in for that event that included global energy leaders, policymakers, investors and development partners. They're all calling for more strategic partnerships and major energy deals across many a market in Africa.
Energy must unite communities, stabilize economies and secure futures. It must power factories, illuminate homes, fuel innovation and build trust between government, investors and citizens.
Africa must cease to be merely an exporter of raw materials and become a center for processing, industrialization and value addition. We will ensure that the wealth beneath our soil is transformed into well-being, employment and opportunities for future generations.
Now, at the same time, Nigeria's intra-African exports to other African countries, they're going up. They're being driven by fuel sales and strong demand, especially within West Africa. But behind the numbers, traders and manufacturers are faced with enormous bottlenecks. And for many, this is a test of whether or not Nigeria can truly position itself as a continental trade hub under the African Continental Free Trade Area. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam reports.
Inside this factory in Abuja, Nigeria's capital, a variety of coconut products, spices and packaged foods are produced for exports. For years, Kafilat INE shipped mainly to the United States, Canada and the United Kingdom. Last year, she turned to Africa, sending goods to the Gambia, Senegal and Zimbabwe. She expected West Africa to be easier, but it hasn't been.
My experience in selling within West Africa, I think it's more tedious than exporting out of the country. The rigidity of every country not harmonizing their certification as one African country is actually hindering us from having general product acceptability.
Kafilat's experience comes as new figures show Nigeria's exports to Africa are climbing. In the first half of 2025, shipments rose 14% to 4.82 trillion naira. ECOWAS countries bought almost 3 trillion naira worth of goods. Fuel topped the list at about $220 billion. West Africa now absorbs more than 62% of Nigeria's African exports. Still, Africa makes up just 10% of Nigeria's total exports, far behind Europe, Asia, and the Americans. The government says AfCFTA tariff concessions and a new air freight corridor to East Africa could cut shipping costs by up to 75%. Nigeria is Africa's largest economy and a major oil producer. But traders and experts say becoming a continental trade hub under AfCFTA will take more than rising export numbers. It will depend on whether transport links improve, border delays ease, and exporters can move goods faster and at lower costs across Africa. For economist Aliu Elias, logistics and energy supply remain central to ease export bottlenecks and expand trade corridors. For exporters, the opportunity is growing. So are the obstacles. The next test would be whether Africa can turn AfCFTA commitments into smooth and make the continent a bigger destination for its goods. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now then, African countries are cautiously welcoming a decision by the United States to extend the African Growth and Opportunity Act. That legislation was first set up in the year 2000. It essentially offers duty-free and quota-free access to the American market to hundreds of products from dozens of eligible African nations. However, the fact that the extension is only for a year has reignited concerns in South Africa and many other countries about long-term trade policy certainty. CGTN's Julie Shire takes up the story from Cape Town.
Be a part of this.
After months of uncertainty and tense deliberations, U.S. President Donald Trump has finally signed a new deal allowing the resumption of the U.S. Sub-Saharan Africa Preferential Trade Pact, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. But contrary to Africa's hopes for a 3-year extension, the agreement will now run just until December 2026.
It's difficult for business to plan for something that's over the next 8 months. With the uncertainty of what comes in the next years. But that's something that we have to work with the U.S.
The landmark AGOA trade program in place for more than 1,800 products from sub-Saharan Africa, duty-free access to the United States, supporting economic growth and job creation across the continent.
It's a helpful instrument for some of our countries like South Africa, where we intend to increase the processing capacity and therefore the capacity to export more finished products.
AGOA negotiations were particularly fraught for South Africa. Pretoria's foreign policy positions placed it in the crosshairs of the Trump administration, and exclusion from the U.S. market would have hit the automotive and agricultural sectors especially hard. With the deal temporarily secure, South Africa now has breathing room to repair relations with Washington.
That creates a platform for us to continue engaging with the U.S., in particular Senate and Congress, about how AGOA would pan out going forward, what the structure would be, and essentially how we would continue to work around that.
At the same time, South Africa is deepening ties with other global partners.
Regardless of AGOA or any other development, South Africa should be diversifying its economy anyway. We shouldn't have to wait for scrutiny on AGOA. And I think this is now a decision that our government and business have taken. We do need to diversify.
Questions over reciprocal tariffs still remain unresolved. South Africa currently faces a 30% duty on certain exports to the United States. But officials are hopeful this can be renegotiated. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town.
On to the business of commodities now. Rising copper prices. A particular ton of that material will cost you over $13,000 now, and that's being driven by demand from electric vehicles and renewable energy tech. That rising price, however, is reshaping global supply chains. As CGTN's Isaac Lukando now tells us from Tanzania, the country is trying to position itself as a key supplier.
Global copper prices have climbed above $13,000 a ton, fueling renewed optimism in Tanzania's mining sector as the metal gains strategic importance in the global energy transition. Long overshadowed by gold, copper is now emerging as one of Tanzania's most promising mineral opportunities. Exports of copper to China, one of Tanzania's key trading partners, reached nearly $25 million in November of 2025 alone. With copper refining facilities now operating in the country's southwest and in the capital Dodoma, the government says value addition will be key to boosting export earnings.
In the past, a copper-bearing rock was just that, a rock. Today we can process it locally into copper cathodes, which adds value. Processing was not available inside the country. Our current goal is to go even further, producing copper rods and finished wires ready for use.
Authorities say about 13.7 million tons of copper deposits have been identified across Tanzania so far. Export has more than doubled, rising from just over 21,000 tons in 2020 to more than 44,000 tons by early last year. Analysts believe that if managed effectively, copper could help Tanzania diversify exports, attract new investment, create jobs, and integrate the country into global green energy supply chains at a critical moment. Tanzania's mining sector has long been dominated by gold, which accounts for around 90% of mineral exports, generating nearly $4.5 billion in revenue last year. To expand the sector's contribution, currently at just over 10% of GDP, the government diversifies its mineral portfolio, with copper playing a central role in that strategy. Critics argue that despite growth in the mining sector, job creation for young Tanzanians remains limited. They say the industry relies heavily on capital-intensive operations that require specialized skills, leaving little room for unskilled local labor. The government, however, says it is working to change that.
A new program called Mining for a Better Tomorrow is designed to ensure people are allocated their own mining areas instead of trespassing on other claims. They will receive training in mining practices, mineral processing and mineral trading, enabling them to benefit directly from their God-given natural resources.
With rising investment and sustained global demand, Tanzania's copper output is projected to exceed 205,000 tons by 2030. The government hopes that increased revenue from copper will help usher in a new phase of economic growth, benefiting both the country and its people. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And we'll leave it there for the time being. Here's what's coming up at the top of the hour, though. We'll be focusing on Zimbabwe. The authorities over there have agreed to a staff-monitored program, a new one with the International Monetary Fund. It effectively paves the way for some interesting policy support for that particular country. We'll have the details on that and lots more coming your way at the top of the hour. For now, though, let's get back into sport with Mahia.
All right, Rama, thank you very much. Here's what's coming up on the program. Sudan's Al Hilal are looking to secure early qualification for the knockout rounds of the CAF Champions League tonight. Well, let's start the sport in northern Italy, where the 2026 Winter Olympics will get underway shortly. A multicultural opening ceremony, which will take place primarily at Milan's San Siro Stadium, has been planned. It will include the Chinese pianist Lang Lang, Italian tenor Andrea Bocelli, and American singer Mariah Carey. Hermione Kitson now reports.
These Olympic Games will unfold across two very different settings. The urban backdrop of Italy's financial and fashion capital, here in Milan, and the dramatic mountain scenery of the Queen of the Dolomites, Cortina. Events will span hundreds of kilometres, and that uniquely dispersed identity will be reflected in the opening ceremony itself.
Of course, you need to make sure that the athletes